Oh, I'll tell you what a great start to the college football season. This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Texas Pete, drama for your mouth. Bob Fiscella along with Hans Heiserer. And Hans, I was pumped. I've been pumped for the last 9 months for the start of this season. No disappointment.
It is the best time of the year, isn't it? I mean, really, people talk about Christmas, whatever. You can have Christmas. Give me college football any day of the week. And it was nice to wake up yesterday with a little crisp, cool air out as well here in Atlanta.
Yeah, the fall was here early, and you mentioned Atlanta, and that's where we're going to start the show today. Alabama last night against Florida State. Tide get the victory 24-7. Game was closer than the score would indicate. Your thoughts, your initial thoughts on how Alabama played, how Alabama looked compared to what your expectations were?
Well, defense and special teams won them the game. I think they had, 9 tackles for a loss. Defense had 3 sacks, a couple forced fumbles, and an interception. So you couple that with Alabama's usual performance on offense, they're going to beat just about anybody. And I thought Jalen Hurts was okay. He made just enough plays with his feet to kind of keep the game alive. 42 rushing attempts compared to 18 passing attempts for Alabama. I think that's a little bit out of, obviously, what they were used to in previous years. But I think that was a clear sign that was the game plan of how they were going to attack Florida State.
Well, before we go ahead and break down this game, let's go ahead and hear from Nick Saban, who spoke in the post-game news conference and said he and his staff really not surprised what they saw by Florida State.
They didn't do a whole lot of stuff that they haven't done in the past. So I think our coaches did a really good job of preparing our team to take advantage of some situations in the kicking game. The block punt was, good scheme based on their protection and how they protect. Should have scooped it and scored it instead of falling on it, but sometimes freshmen are freshmen.
Well, there you heard it from the coach, and I agree with what he said. I don't think there was a whole lot of surprises in this football game. It was just smash-mouth football. I think the question in a lot of people's minds going into this game was how good would Alabama be with all the losses that they had from graduation. And I think this is a national championship contender again next year. If there was any doubt at all, that was removed last night.
There's no doubt about it. If I could do anything in sports, from a journalistic standpoint, it would be, and they would never allow this, especially me, to go to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and spend a week with Nick Saban, his staff, his strength and conditioning coach, their study halls, their nutritionists, the whole thing. It's such a perfect science that they've accumulated there over the years. Seriously, they bring these kids in. They're the right type of people. They stay out of trouble. They coach them up. They get stronger in the weight room, and they just replace them. It's like the elephant in the circus. He dies. What do? You go get another elephant.
He stole the page from Bill Belichick. It's just systematic with Nick Saban, and there is no detail that's not accounted for. And it's just amazing to see last night. I think one of the big questions to me last night was how would the offense change with the new offensive coordinator and Brian Daboll, and it's still Nick Saban's offense at the end of the day. I'm not sure we saw any changes.
No, other than the little lopsided balance that we talked about, 42-18, but I think that was part of the game plan. You did see the deep pass there to Calvin Ridley that put him on the board for good. So, he's going to be their big playmaker offensively, but how about this Harris kid? He comes out of nowhere. Everybody's talking about Bo Scarborough being the guy. Harris comes in, sets the tone there in the first quarter with a 40-yard run. Ho-hum, here's another running back at Alabama that might run for 1,000 yards and win a Heisman Trophy one day.
He not only sets the tone in the backfield with that 40-yard run, but Alabama sets the tone with its special teams. He comes up with the block punt. This is why you play starters on your special teams. Nick Saban alluded to this. He will continue to play starters on his special teams. Harris comes through, blocks the punt, and it really turns the game around.
You talk about Saban's attention to detail. You heard him in the press conference there. He just beat the number 3 team in the country pretty one-sidedly. And what does he say? Yeah, we blocked the punt, but we should have scooped it up and ran it in for a touchdown. So there's no stone unturned when it comes to Nick Saban. I thought there was an interesting play last night that's very indicative of what kind of coach he is. There was a 15-yard personal foul penalty, right? And at the same time, there was a second warning from the officials that was a sideline rule. The coaches were overstepping. And so Saban takes a minute. It's only 5 yards. So now he's getting 10 instead of 15. He takes a step back. He kind of puts his hands. You could tell he's kind of anxious. And he lays into anybody within a 20-yard radius of him. Nobody came anywhere near that white line the rest of the night.
No surprise on that either. We're already getting a ton of comments on Facebook. Got one here. Have the Gators scored an offensive touchdown yet? We're going to get to the Gators. Just hold off on that just a minute. But I do want to talk just a little bit about Jalen Hurts before we break down his performance last night. Let's hear from head coach Nick Saban.
I thought Jalen did a good job. He did what we asked him to do. I think a lot of the things that could have been really good plays for Jalen didn't turn out so well because we didn't protect very well. Now, he will tell you that sometimes he's responsible for that because he could redirect the protection, but there were other times when we made mental errors up front and didn't block them, and we had people open but couldn't get them the ball. So the whole deal on offense, we have to do a better job of executing, especially when it comes to the passing game. They're a pretty good front. We could complain about running the ball better, but we probably ran it good enough if we could have had the kind of balance that we wanted in the game and been able to protect so that we could make some plays and make some throws down the field. But I thought Jalen did a good job in the game.
Nick Saban from his post-game press conference last night. Jalen Hurts threw for just 96 yards, but quite frankly, I don't think the stats tell the story. He looked pretty darn good to me.
No, he looked good. And, give Florida State a little bit of defense. I mean, defensively, they probably have 5 or 6 first-round draft picks on that side of the ball. And, there were time and time again where it was all on their shoulders. Offensively, they weren't able to do anything. So it was up to Florida State's defense to keep him into the game. But, no, as far as Jalen Hurts goes, he's going to be fine. He didn't make any mistakes that was going to cost him the football game. I do think, however, we haven't spoke about the play at the end of the first half. Clearly a pass interference in the end zone. Florida State could have taken the lead before halftime. Turned out to be a field goal. Of course, they blocked the field goal because that's what Alabama does. And then that horrendous stretch for Florida State in the third quarter where it's just bum, 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 bum. I don't remember. Blocked field goal, blocked punt, couple interceptions, and it was all she wrote.
Block punt, you had the fumble on the kick return, and then you had the interception. Yeah, Jimbo Fisher was hot about that lack of pass interference call. Clearly it was pass interference. They'll get the ball at the 2-yard line. Are they able to score a touchdown? Does it change the game? I don't think so. At the end of the day, we're going to see the same game, and Alabama's defense just dominated what Florida State tried to do offensively, and we're hoping that Francois is okay. Went out with a knee injury. This could be bad news for Florida State the rest of the season. We might not see him again, and they're being pretty tight-lipped about the injury.
Yeah, you hate to hear about that, and it looked bad when it happened late fourth quarter, just trying to make a play. And again, Alabama's speed really showing up there on the tape. I mean, that guy was out of the play and catches one of the faster quarterbacks in NCAA football, and you hope the kid's okay. The conversation, Bob, before this game was if the loser of this game goes on to win their conference, respectively the ACC and the SEC, they're still going to be a part of the national championship conversation. If Francois is not here, I don't see Florida State being in that conversation. This is good news for Clemson.
I think something to keep in mind with Alabama. So they play their season opening game at the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is spectacular. Then, if they get to the SEC championship game, they'll return to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then, if they're fortunate enough to get to the national championship game, you're back there. This is almost like going to be a second home for the Crimson Tide this year. Potentially could be. And I think there's an advantage to that.
Oh, of course. And not a bad place to play either. That place is absolutely gorgeous. We all know about the success that Alabama had at the old Georgia Dome, so I'd expect more continued success and opportunities as well. So long as they keep winning games, they're going to be in SEC championships. They're going to be in these Chick-fil-A kickoff classics, and Peach Bowl is always going to be a part of the Final Four. I will say this quickly. I do think that both schools' athletic departments deserve a ton of credit for even scheduling a game like this.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of schools don't. I've heard Saban talk about it before, and Jimbo as well, where they're willing to play a team like this on a neutral field, but they're not going to do the home and home anymore.
All right, let's go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Florida, Michigan in Jerry World yesterday. And the Gators, as someone pointed out, still looking for their first offensive touchdown. This thing got ugly after the 2 pick sixes. Florida showed us nothing offensively, 11 yards rushing in the football game.
Well, we knew how shorthanded they were going to be in this game. 2 wide receivers are starting tailback out. Defensively, you knew that they were going to compete. But the quarterback decision is what really blew my mind in this. McElwain decides to start the freshman, Franks, the redshirt freshman, and he looks the part, man. He's 6'4", 225 pounds, made that great throw out of the gates to really get the Florida offense moving for the only time in that opening drive. And he makes a costly fumble there in the third quarter early on, and they pull him, and they put in Zaire, the transfer from Notre Dame, and he's never seen again. I think in hindsight, I don't know what the decision was behind that. I really don't. It was almost as if, Bob, that he had told Zaire that if he came to Florida, he could play quarterback for him. And he just wanted to live up to his promise, I guess, because to me, Franks was the better quarterback yesterday, and Del Rio didn't even get on the field.
All right, we'll talk about the quarterbacks in just a second. But first, let's go to the post-game news conference and hear what Coach Jim McElwain had to say about the game. And quite frankly, he was a little beaten down by the results.
We've got some ball games ahead of us that we've got to get ready for. So, plain and simple, take your whooping. And I'm taking it.
All right. The coach obviously expected something different. What can we expect from this Gator team as we look ahead to the rest of the season? Is this a Florida team that can compete in what seems to be a wide-open SEC East?
I think so. I think what you walk away from today is that Franks is going to be your quarterback. How he handles the suspensions moving forward is going to be a huge part of where they go. Obviously, you're talking about their 3 best playmakers, and the schedule is going to get tough for them. They play Tennessee here in a couple weeks, so we'll find out sooner than later. But I think a lot of times when you have schools that play these, in Florida State as well in this case, with young players early, and he played a lot of young guys yesterday. He had to. When you play these games early in the season, it's almost like baptism by fire. You know, how much worse can it get?
Absolutely.
So I think that they're going to learn from this. They're going to figure out who their quarterback is. They'll address the suspensions, and then we'll move on. But they're definitely going to be a force to be reckoned with in the SEC East.
One of the fans writing in that's saying Doug Nussmeier, the offensive coordinator, is the new Randy Sanders, alluding to Tennessee's past offensive coordinator. Nothing different this year, but like you say, you got to give the Gators a little bit of time. But let's talk about the quarterback situation. Why did Coach McElwain make that change? Let's go ahead and hear from the coach in his post-game news conference.
No, I just thought we needed to, try to shake up the batting order there a little bit. Thought Malik might come in and give us a little change of pace at that point. Obviously, still in the ball game, and weren't able to really generate anything. So I was thinking maybe his feet might be able to help us and make a few plays for us. Thought we had a good plan, obviously, and as it turned out, the plan was pretty well foiled by getting physically whooped by big, strong guys, and that was disappointing.
Well, we heard the coach earlier talk about making that change at quarterback, and like you said, Malik Zaire, he's the senior graduate transfer. It was between Texas and Florida, and I do think McElwain somehow had to promise him some playing time, although Felipe Franks is the guy that got the start.
Yeah, he was impressive to me early on and made a couple big throws down the field, extended some plays with his feet, showed some command of the huddle. Players are paying attention to him. It's not like he was shell-shocked by the situation, but McElwain can say what he wants, and I could be wrong here, but I just thought the timing of it was curious because it happened right after a fumble. It was a third down play. Right. He made a nice play to get to the first down and didn't protect the football. And if you're ever going to choose a time to prove a point to a young player who's going to be a cornerstone of your future moving forward, that's it. And I think maybe part of him knew that game was getting away from him at that point, and maybe he went ahead and said, hey, let's see what Zaire's got so I can commit to Franks long-term the rest of the year, because Zaire showed me nothing. In
getting to the SEC championship game the last couple of years, the Gators have been able to rely on their defense. This year, having lost 8 starters from last year, I'm not so sure that this defense can carry this team to where it wants to get.
Well, time will tell. They do have athletes. You saw those 2 pick sixes.
They do have athletes, yes.
They had those 2 pick sixes were amazing. Special teams there. Florida's always going to have athletes. So we'll see how this things shake out. I mean, Tennessee in a couple weeks, not particularly known for their offense, especially this year. I don't know how offensively dominant they're going to be, but I think this Florida defense is going to be fine. Offensive line, that was a major concern yesterday. Michigan's got some. Listen, Jim Harbaugh, say what you want to say about him, but what he's done at Michigan in the short time he's been there, if he ever gets a quarterback, they're going to be in the conversation for national championships every season.
Well, it's Northern Colorado next week for Florida. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how McElwain handles that quarterback situation. Does he make the change at starter? I kind of doubt it. I think Felipe Franks is going to get the start again next week, but I'm sure we're going to see Zaire again in the football game.
Right. The question is, do these suspended players come back for week 2? Time will tell.
Yeah, 10 guys you didn't have. Are these guys coming back? All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Big win for South Carolina yesterday. Knock off a very good NC State team, 35-28. And the stats, as you can see, were really lopsided in this game. But South Carolina, I think they look better than this offensively. And I think Will Muschamp not only has to be happy with the victory, but happy with the way both his offense and defense have played in this football game. I know the stats are not very good, but when they needed to make plays, they did.
This is a great win for South Carolina. You look at the mess that he inherited last year, Spurrier walking away 2 years ago, rather. And, you get the opening kickoff from Debo, and everybody's excited. 7-0, and then sure enough, NC State comes back at the end of the game, 4th and goal, an opportunity to tie the game and send it into overtime, and the defense makes a stand. You talked earlier about the SEC East being wide open with Florida and Georgia and all these teams. South Carolina could be in that conversation as well.
Well, we're going to find out exactly how good South Carolina is compared to the rest of the conference next week. Gamecocks,
right,
with a huge SEC game next week, go on the road to take on Missouri. You mentioned, do you think they could be in the conversation?
It's a big game for both schools next week. Missouri, they're still putting up points. Would they put up 80 yesterday?
Almost.
Almost 80? I don't care who you play. 80 points is a lot of points. But South Carolina, Missouri next week, the winner of that football game, 2-0, 1-0 in the SEC, that's a big one. I think it's a 7 o'clock start next week. But, you can't give Will Muschamp enough credit. Here's a guy who went to Florida, took his lumps, a team that was always known for its defense. His teams always competed, but offensively, they just had nothing. And last year, it looked like it was more of the same. South Carolina had no offense, and here they come out. They find ways to win, put up points, rather, special teams defense. And all of a sudden, if you're a Gamecock fan, things are looking up.
Well, a lot of people on the scroll are still not believers in Will Muschamp. I think a lot of them
probably
are Florida fans. Hey, Will doesn't look so bad after yesterday, does he? It's going to be interesting to see. I think this team with a wide open, you got to love Boom, Coach Boom. But with the wide open division, I think they will compete. Only time will tell, but Missouri's going to be a good test on the road next week, and we'll talk about the Tigers in just a minute. But back to the Texas Pete scoreboard show. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Big win yesterday for LSU, last night, I should say. Tigers at home beat a BYU team that won 9 games last year, 27-0. Looked really good in this game, defensively especially.
Yeah, well, Darius guys running the football. I mean, they had their way with him. If you saw the box score in this, I'm watching the game, and I'm like, has BYU even had the football? The time of possession, 42-18 in favor of LSU. BYU never crossed the 50-yard line. Not one time in the whole game. And LSU played, I want to say, 7 or 8 true freshmen in the game last night, so it was a glorified exhibition. But the storyline here was Danny Etling, the quarterback. You bring in Matt Canada, the new offensive coordinator. That's going to be the problem at LSU. Are they going to have a quarterback 15-17? Throws a couple touchdowns. Coach O's got to be excited about the start. It's a big win for LSU.
And this is an LSU team that beat a BYU team that won 9 games last year. They're not playing the Sisters of the Poor last night. I was impressed by the defense. Final numbers, by the way, LSU gave up 78 yards on defense, which, if Ed Orgeron's going to get it done, 78. 78 total yards.
That's unbelievable.
This is a BYU team that can play, and I was just shocked by how well LSU played defensively and just dominated this football game. Like you said, time of possession pretty much tells the story.
This is without Arden Key. This is without arguably the best defensive player in the country, and you still hold BYU, a team that fields grown men, 24, 25-year-old young men that go on their missions, and they're a little bit more physically developed. I mean, seriously, it's not an easy team to play, and they have -5 total yards rushing.
I'm reading all the post, and man, not a whole lot of love for Coach O's team. But I'll tell you what, at the end of the day, I think LSU is going to be there.
I do too.
Can they beat Alabama? I don't know about that, but I think LSU, they certainly have the talent to be there at the end of the day and compete.
I thought that was the biggest surprise for me yesterday. I did not expect them to. I expect them to win the game, but just to dominate BYU the way they did, it was pretty eye-opening. I think the rest of the SEC West, including Alabama, took notice as well.
Kudos go out to defensive coordinator Dave Aranda. Here's a guy that I know Tom Herman wanted big time at Texas. Orgeron was
Probably
able
could have used him. Sorry.
That's another story. But his defense was ready to play, and I think his defensive acumen, he's always got his players seemingly in the right position. And I look for LSU, if strictly just by their defense, to be in there the entire season. But as you said, if Danny Etling can prove to be a solid quarterback, which I think the jury's still out, who knows how good this team can be.
Right. Defensively, they're always going to be athletically as good as anybody in the country, including Alabama. The question with LSU has always been quarterback play, and that's why Les Miles is out of a job and Coach O's got one. And so Danny Etling gets the job, and I don't think there was any surprise coming out of camp that he was going to be the guy. And you hear the players talk about him, and they really like him. They like what he can bring to the table, and 15 to 17, couple touchdowns. So if he can do what he's supposed to do, and that's not turn the ball over and let that defense do its thing and rely on a Heisman Trophy candidate at tailback, I think LSU's going to be okay.
Well, the question remains, can he make plays against the better defenses? Still to be determined. We're going to find out, but obviously a pretty darn good start for Danny Etling. All right, I want to go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Georgia opens up at home, 31-10 victory over Appalachian State. You see the numbers on Jake Fromm. Of course, Fromm had to come into this game on the third series after Jacob Eason goes down with a knee injury. We're not sure how serious the injury is and if he'll play next week against Notre Dame. But your initial thoughts on the freshman Fromm?
Well, Fromm looked good. He was far from perfect, but you got to understand that once the game was out of hand, they didn't expect him to do much. It was a lot of Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, which isn't a bad thing to fall back on. I thought Fromm did okay. The one thing that I really took notice of is when he got in the huddle. You hear the story about Matt Ryan for the Atlanta Falcons. His first pass he ever made was an 80-yard touchdown pass. They said he came in the huddle, guys were looking around, they weren't paying attention, and he smacked one guy in the rear and said, "Hey, right here." And so I've talked to guys that played in the league, that played the position, and they said, watch to see when a young guy, in particular a freshman or a rookie, when they come into the huddle, are the guys responding to them. And he took immediate command of that football team. You're talking about a team, and this is no shot on Jake Eason. They had 10 plays for 3 yards. Fromm comes in, 80 yards and a touchdown, 75 yards and a touchdown. So he passes the leadership in that part of the whole thing. As far as the throws, he made some great throws. Now, do you have a controversy next week if Eason comes back? That's the question.
That is the question. How do you answer that? So, Eason is healthy. He can play next week. Your offensive coordinator, Jim Chaney, your head coach, Kirby Smart. What do you do?
I go with Fromm.
Really?
I go with Fromm. I love the way the guys responded to him yesterday. Eason, to me, maybe you give him another week to heal. It looked like a hyperextension. Hopefully it's nothing worse than that. But I go with Fromm. And I tell you one thing. We talked a little bit about this before the show. Michael and I did, our producer. When Eason got hurt and he went to put weight on his leg, he couldn't put any weight on it. He knows he couldn't go. He hopped out there on one leg because he knew Fromm was standing there. You know what I mean? He didn't want to give him a chance to go out there and show what he could do. And he said, I can't play. This is going to be bad. And Fromm comes out and goes right down the field.
Fromm, I don't know that he looked spectacular, but
right.
He did everything he had to do, and it seemed like he had a command of this offense. It looks like his teammates were backing him, and I think that's key when you can get your team behind you and they believe in you.
Right. So back-to-back true freshmen for Georgia, but what a better situation to come into when you got Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, which I thought were, outside of the injury, the story for Georgia yesterday. They were both able to do whatever they wanted to do, a true thunder and lightning, if you will, at the tailback position. Both of them can catch the ball. Michel a little bit more, but what two great weapons to have for Kirby Smart.
Well, I'm reading the Post, and someone said, I thought Nick Chubb would put up better numbers, 15 carries, 96 yards. Tommy Tuberville, the former Auburn coach, did the broadcast last night. You like Tommy?
I like Coach
Nice
Chubb.
job.
I thought he did a good job. It's his first time. Come on.
But he did mention last night that he thought Chubb looked a lot more explosive than he did last year, and I'm inclined to agree with him. Nick Chubb had solid numbers last year, but he wasn't the same player as he was 2 years ago before the injury. I did think he looked really good last night.
Oh, yeah. With that kind of injury, when you're coming back, it's do you trust yourself? You could tell last year he didn't really trust himself. He was scared to make some cuts, and rightfully so. You saw that injury against Tennessee. I think most people would be a little hesitant to make some cuts out there, but he's got that full trust back. And a little credit to the coaching staff last night for leaving him in what was a one-sided affair. They could have played some other guys, put Harrion in, but they wanted him to take some hits. They wanted him to build some confidence. There's only so much you can do in practice, and I think Nick Chubb's got to feel pretty good where he is health-wise, getting ready to go up to South Bend and take on a pretty good Notre Dame team.
Well, here's my deal if you do start Fromm next week. A lot of people were saying that Jim Chaney's playbook was really small last year. He didn't want to open it up with the freshman quarterback. He didn't give Eason a chance to call a whole lot of plays at the line of scrimmage to audible. Are you back in that situation if Fromm is your starter next week?
Yeah, I think so. I think you really are. But here's the good news. You just mentioned he just went through it. so maybe he learned from his mistakes. I don't know. But I will say this. In my opinion, because don't forget, Eason was a Rick guy. You know, he was a Mark Rick guy. So in my opinion, if Fromm gets to start on Saturday and Georgia wins the game, regardless of how he plays, it's his job.
I'll tell you what.
It'd be a heck of a story. But I
loved what I saw from Fromm.
But
national TV in South Bend, putting a freshman out there, boy, something, I don't know. It just
what have you
scares me.
seen out of Eason that makes you think that,
I agree.
You know,
just the fact that he's been, even though he's just a true sophomore, he's been there, done that. There's something to be said for that.
Right. Georgia fans got to be
saying.
feeling pretty good, though, today. You know, the way that the running backs played, defense basically shut him out until a couple late turnovers. So I think, you know, this is a good start for Georgia and Kirby Smart. Outside of the injury to their starting quarterback.
Outside of that, good start.
Other than that, they're doing okay.
All right, take you back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Auburn, home opener last night. Tigers knock off Georgia Southern 41-7. You have a couple of running backs. Petway doesn't even play in this game. You have a couple of running backs go for over 100 yards. Good, solid start for Gus Malzahn's team.
Yeah, you know, I thought the quarterback Statham got off to a little slow start, but found to hit his stride there in the second quarter. They opened things up, but you know, this was a rehearsal to get ready for the big show next week.
Clemson.
Clemson's in. They're insane.
This is insane how well they played.
Right.
You know, roll out a new quarterback. Look great.
I'm watching that game because there was nothing else on at 12 o'clock. And every time I looked up, Clemson was going 80 yards. Now, no offense to Kent State, but to go up to Happy Valley next week for a freshman quarterback, that's going to be a tough game for Auburn. I think we're going to find out a lot about who they are and what they're going to be this season, because those are the types of teams you got to compete with in the West if you want to be considered a realistic threat to take down Alabama. So we'll see, but I mean, they started with a win, so they're 1-0, and that's all you can ask for.
Yeah, Stidham, the numbers weren't great. Throws for just 185 yards. Of course, the big difference between the Tigers' offense last year and this year, now you got Chip Lindsey directing this offense, got a great resume. I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens next week, because Clemson is going to force Auburn to throw the football.
Right.
The Tigers aren't going to run for 350 yards against Clemson next week. Ken Stidham handled that. He had, a transfer from Baylor, put up some great numbers at Baylor. Is he going to be ready to handle this offense, and is he going to be able to throw the ball against a defense the quality of Clemson? I think that's what it comes down to.
You saw some great defensive line play last night out of Florida State and Alabama. Clemson might have the number one defensive line in the country, and that's a tough task for a team to go on the road and play. But, back again to the whole baptism by fire thing. This is an experience for them to go on a road, play a big opponent like that. You can only learn and move forward. And who knows? Crazier things have happened. But, for Gus Malzahn, to be on the proverbial hot seat, I don't understand. The Butch Jones thing, I get a little bit, but even though they've been bitten by the injury bug in the last couple of years. But Gus Malzahn, the job that he's done there, now he's got a quarterback in play. You look at the division that he's played. His quarterback's a freshman. So I can't see him being on the hot seat this year, regardless of how many games they lose.
Well, going back to Facebook Live, Wayne posted Auburn's defense, yes. And you look at the numbers last night, Auburn's defense was amazing. Georgia Southern, not really sure where Georgia Southern is since the coaching change a year ago, but Georgia Southern 0 for 15 on third downs, 41 yards of total offense. Auburn's defense, I think the question is, how good are they going to be this year? We're going to find out next week.
Yeah, they've been loading up on these guys with top recruiting classes, especially on the defensive side of the ball the last 2 or 3 years. They were a little green last year, so starting to show some maturity there. And, yeah, going to be a big part of them moving forward. If you're going to play in the SEC, you better have a good defense. If you don't, if you don't, you're not going to be winning many football games.
Well, to me, this Tiger team is the most intriguing team in the entire conference.
They're the wild card, right?
They are the wild
right.
card. Are they a 7-win team? Is Lindsey the right guy to run the offense, or is this a team that is going to compete? Because, you don't win on the plains. You don't win 10 games. People want your head. And,
right.
And Gus Malzahn has proven that he can win. Can he get out of his own way, so to speak? And can this team compete in the SEC West? Are they as good as LSU talent-wise in Alabama? I don't know. I don't know if you have an answer to that, but at this point in time, I really don't know.
Well, we're going to find out next Saturday. That's about as close to Alabama as you can get.
Want to go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard, spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete, and Auburn coming off that win. Want to talk about Kentucky with a big victory, knocks off Southern Miss 24-17, go down to Hattiesburg and get it done. And Mark Stoops is an offensive coach, but, not really an offensive coach, but his defense stepped up last night, just holding Southern Miss, pretty good team. 4 of 17 on third downs. Kentucky gets it done defensively.
He's done a nice job there in a few years that he's been there. They were bottom of the barrel, and they're competing week after week. So this is a nice start to their season, and they're going to get somebody. They're going to get somebody. I don't know who it's going to be. It could be Georgia, it could be South Carolina, it could be Florida. You never know, but they compete. And that's all you can ask for if you're Kentucky football.
Stephen Johnson did a nice job, threw for 176 yards, didn't turn it over. Denzel Ware, fumble return for a touchdown. Mark Stoops comes into Kentucky. It's now 5 years. He goes 2-10 his first season, then a couple of 5-7 seasons. Last year, finally gets this team to a bowl. They go 7-6. Can they take that next step? I don't know if they can get there, and I don't know how much pressure is on him, but can they take that next step? Can they compete for an SEC East title? I don't think they're there yet.
Man, it's got to be tough. It's got to be tough because you talk about where everything starts, it's recruiting. And you're sitting there at Kentucky and you're just surrounded by Big Ten schools, ACC schools, SEC schools taking the players out of you. Because there's some great high school talent coming out of the state of Kentucky. They're just not staying in Kentucky to play football. The irony of that.
The irony of that. Well, I'm reading the scroll, and the Alabama fans are out in full force. Come on, people. Nobody's beaten Bama in the SEC. Thomas.
Oh, here we go.
I think it's too early to tell, but
Thomas, what did you see yesterday out of, who knows? It's week one. One thing I've learned, Bob, in working in Atlanta is you cannot speculate anything in college football week 12, week 13, much less week 1.
Exactly.
It changes every week.
Hey, Roderick, writing in Canada, said LSU only used about 10% of the playbook last night, and I think he's right. LSU did only use about 10% of the playbook, but if you go by the past, LSU's probably better when they only use 10% of the playbook because sometimes in the past, Les Miles has outfought himself, and we'll see if Ed Orgeron is going to end up being the same. Let's go back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tail game with Texas Pete. Another win by the SEC. Ole Miss, not really sure what the Rebels would come out and how they would look under new coach Matt Luke, but they put up an impressive victory over South Alabama. Shea Patterson, tremendous numbers as you see. I think, Hans, the question is, where's this Ole Miss team going to be at the end of the day?
I think they're the West version of Kentucky. I think they're going to get somebody. I saw Patterson yesterday. Saw him play a little bit in high school at IMG. Really jumped off the page at you, or jumped off the screen rather, because he's just such a unique talent. I don't want to compare him to Johnny Manziel, but I'm going to compare him to Johnny Manziel. That's who he reminds me of. I mean, guy makes plays, extends plays with his feet, and find guys open downfield. They have arguably the best wide receiver core in the SEC. So they're going to get somebody this year.
Well, certainly Matt Luke hasn't been given the job on a permanent basis. He is on a trial by fire here. And
nobody wants to be in that situation. Like me and you both, we're trial by fire right now. We might not be here tomorrow.
We next week at 10 a.m. Sunday. We're hopefully going to be here all season long. But what does it take for him to get that job on a permanent basis? Does it take 6 wins? Can he get there with 4 wins if the team looks good? I don't know where LSU turns at this point in time.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss has just got to compete.
Ole Miss, excuse me.
I think they just have to compete week after week, because what's going to happen with them moving forward, much like Penn State for different reasons, is the recruiting challenges. They're going to have a hard time convincing people's parents to come play football there after what just happened.
I love Wally's comment here. Back to Alabama. I personally think it's going to come down to the Iron Bowl in order to determine who wins the West. It may well come down to the Iron Bowl, but LSU is still going to be a factor. And will Mississippi State be a factor? Probably not, but Mississippi State's defense was amazing last night. Knock off Charleston Southern 49-0, give up only 2 first downs in the process. Dan Mullen always has this team ready to play. I think they're past the Dak Prescott regime last year. They didn't make a bowl game. I think they're going to be back in a bowl game this year. This is a solid football team.
Right.
And Todd Grantham as your defensive coordinator.
Todd Grantham, good old coach. Yeah, I will say this about Mississippi State. They're trending in the right direction. And I think a bowl game is not out of the question for them this year, but at whose expense? The SEC West, they're not going to put all 6 or 7 schools in bowl games. Whose expense? Is it going to be Arkansas? Is it going to be Ole Miss? Obviously, they're ineligible, but you look at that division from top to bottom, and I just don't see a team that's not bowl-worthy, if you will.
Well, Dan Mullen's teams always surprise me every year. When they get to 7 wins, when they get to 8 wins, it surprises me. I thought he was going to be the next head coach at Florida a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and Georgia. There was some talk about him possibly being one of the replacements for Mark Richt with the ties here. So, but for whatever reason, obviously a couple pay increases in there have kept him in Starkville. And a couple things for Mississippi State. A lot of the play that you see on the field now are the recruits that come on the heels of that Dak Prescott season. You have a year like that, it's going to bring in some recruits. So those guys are starting to get on the field. And now you got Ole Miss, who's literally in flames as far as their program goes. That's good for old Mississippi State. That's good for business.
All right, we're here in Atlanta, so we got to see a lot of Todd Grantham. He's now in his first season as the defensive coordinator at Mississippi State. Overall thoughts on Todd? Is he a genius? I know the first couple of years in Georgia, he got things turned around, and this defense was looking fantastic, and then kind of his star kind of shot down a little bit.
Yeah, you have to recruit to his personnel. He needs a nose tackle, he needs some fast linebackers, so it's going to take time. I was very interested to see how he worked at Louisville with Bobby Petrino and had a chance to see that firsthand, and obviously didn't turn out very well, so now he's in Starkville. But no, he's a great defensive mind. He's a great defensive mind, and he can recruit as well. So give him a couple years there, which has shown that he can't do, and that's stay in one place for more than 2 years. But let him stay there for a couple years, get the talent around him between he and Mullen. They should be able to do some good things there.
Coming back to the roll. Come on, Mark and Tanya, give us something more than just roll Tide. Come on, people. Let's get a little bit more in-depth than that. Tide is rolling, though, so we're not going to argue that point. Back to the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Missouri, a 72-43 winner over 72. Look at the numbers on Drew Lock. 521, 7 touchdown passes. A lot of hype around this kid. Maybe he'll live up to this hype this year. Where's Missouri going to be at the end of the day? We're going to find out a lot next week when they play host to South Carolina.
That's a huge game. That's a huge game. I mean, the winner of that game's in the driver's seat early on in the SEC East. I think it tells us a lot where these two teams are going to be. I mean, how good is Missouri? I mean, who's Missouri State? I mean, was this legitimate offensive output that they put up yesterday? Would they be able to do that against big boys? And South Carolina, if they find a way to win this game, their expectations all of a sudden go from, hey, maybe we'll go to a bowl game to where, hey, man, we're in this thing. We can compete in the SEC East and maybe find a way to get in the Mercedes-Benz Dome.
Well, Milo's typing in, hey, come on, guys, Missouri has no defense. And I'll tell you, I didn't see much of this game, saw the highlights, read about it. They trailed in the second quarter to Missouri State 35-34.
And then they decided to turn it on. That's surprising about their defense because you think you go back to those Pinkel teams, and that's what they were known for. I mean, they got
hard-hitting defense.
First-round draft pick after first-round draft pick in the NFL every year.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see where Missouri gets their wins from. I got a diehard Missouri buddy. He's on me. He's like, we're 8-4 this year, Bob. We're 8-4. I don't see where they get the 8 wins. Maybe their defense is better than they showed last night, but I still, at the end of the day, don't see where this team gets to the 8 wins.
No. I think all in all yesterday, Bob, a very good day for the SEC outside of what you saw with Florida. You know, I still think Florida's best days are ahead of them. I think they're going to get better as the season goes on. I think Jim McElwain managed that game with those expectations that, hey, we're up against a heck of a football team in Michigan. This one's getting away from us a little bit, but they're going to get better as the season goes on. And after week 1, people say Alabama's in the national championship. Yeah, they're the best team in college football on paper right now, but anything can happen, and the SEC is wide open right now, especially if you take into consideration how LSU looked yesterday. It was very surprising to me.
Well, Tracy writes in and says Alabama looked average, ordinary.
Offensively, they did not look good.
No, they didn't. I mean, they didn't put up the numbers, but you are playing against Florida State.
Sure.
And, I think it's, you got 5-star talent against 5-star talent. What do you expect? Alabama's not opening the entire playbook in the first game. I don't want to say Nick Saban played it close to the vest.
Right.
But he knows deep down in places he's not going to talk about. He could lose that football game and still get to where he needs to be at the end of the day. I don't know if we saw the whole playbook with Brian Dable last night.
No, probably not. But, Alabama, offensively, they did not impress me last night. I mean, the offensive line, I don't think opened up the run game, but I guess we'll have to see because, like you said, the only other team that they've played up until this point is probably got about 6 or 7 guys going to the National Football League at some point. So it's really hard to get a fair assessment. Give it a couple more weeks, but clearly Alabama's going to be in the conversation.
All right, back to the Texas Pete scoreboard. Spice up your tailgate with Texas Pete. Vanderbilt opens up with a victory. First time in 5 years that the Doors win their season opener. Get it done defensively against a very good Conference USA team in Middle Tennessee. And Derek Mason, 1-0 for the first time in his career as the Doors coach.
This is a little bit of a surprise. I think most people had this game going the other way. This is only a 2-point spread. So Vanderbilt comes in. They got up early. It was 21-0 before you even had a chance to get the game on and see what was going on. And so full credit to them.
Kyle Shermer goes 20 of 28, throws for almost 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on Derek Mason's team, but can he get this team to where James Franklin had it is the question.
I don't see that. James Franklin's a special coach, man. You saw that when he was there, what he got out of those kids and what he's done in Happy Valley in 3 years. He's a special football coach.
I love this, Tracy. Arkansas is going to end up 9-3. I don't really see that, but since he mentions Arkansas, Hogs get it done on Thursday night, knock off Florida A&M 49-7. Chase Hayden, the freshman, played like anything but a freshman. This kid looked good. Brett Bielema on the hot seat. When you look at Arkansas, I don't know if you want to look into your crystal ball and come up with a win total, but is this a team that maybe is on the fringes? Maybe they can win 8 or 9 games. Is that what it's going to take to keep Bielema's job?
Their defense is terrible. Their defense is just terrible.
Just come out and say it.
Well, it's a shame because the experiment of bringing Bielema down here from the Big Ten was, can this style of football be sustainable in the SEC, in particular in the SEC West, and that's 6 offensive linemen or however many they let them play with, and just pound it, play action. And offensively, yes, he's shown it that it can work. But on the other side of the ball, they cannot stop anybody, and it has cost them time and time and time again, at least 3 wins a season, because they can't stop anybody.
Well, here's my problem with that type of system working in the SEC. Can it work? Like you said, absolutely. Can you pound it? Can you stop the run? Can you win? Absolutely. If you have the athletes, and at the end of the day, he can't recruit like Alabama's going to recruit, or Auburn, or LSU. Brett Bielema makes for great copy. I hope he can get it done at Arkansas for Hogs fans' sakes, but I don't see him being able to get over that hump, at least not this year, not the foreseeable future.
No, I'm in agreement with that, but I think he'll probably get one more year, assuming things don't really jump off the track. And our viewer seems to think 9-3. If they go 9-3 this year, he's probably going to get an extension.
Let me give you my phone number. We'll make a bet after we get done. No, I just don't see this team winning 9 games. I love Brett Bielema. I love that he comes in there and he takes no prisoners.
Tough schedule, man.
It's just tough in the SEC West.
Right.
All right, let's look ahead. We're going to get back to Alabama. We'll talk a little bit more about LSU, but want to look ahead to the game coming up this evening. Texas A&M goes on the road, takes on UCLA. A&M is probably going to start a redshirt freshman in Nick Starkel. What do you make of the Aggies?
Yeah, I was talking to you before the show about Kevin Sumlin, and I don't understand why he's on the hot seat. I mean, the SEC West, we know about the teams there. We know who he's got to recruit against. You throw in Baylor, TCU, Texas. You know, he's got his hands full. You know, he was very successful with Johnny Manziel, and it's been a slow decline ever since. So this is a big season for him, but I think you got to almost give him a pass because of who he's going up against. But they're not willing to do that.
They're not getting a pass. They're
not doing that. What are the expectations at Texas A&M? What have they ever? Am I missing something?
Well, you talk about no. Are you missing something? No, except that it's college football, and you just expanded your stadium to well over 100,000 seats. We need to fill these things every Saturday, and the way we're going to do that is win football games. But you talk about the little downward spiral. His first season with Johnny Manziel, go 11-2, 6-2 in the conference. Okay, great first season in the SEC, fantastic. His second season, 9-4, 4-4 in the conference, and 8-5, just 3 wins in the conference. 2 more 8-5 seasons, 4-4 in the conference. I'm not saying they joined the SEC with expectations that they would win the division and compete for an SEC championship every year, but you are now in the year 6 of the Kevin Sumlin regime, and except for Johnny Manziel, you haven't even come close to competing for a championship.
He's putting guys in the league. They're competing.
Oh, they get talent.
Right.
They get talent.
Well, you know, with that being said, I like A&M in this game. I think they go on the road. I don't trust Jim Mora and UCLA as far as I can throw him. And the Rosen one, we'll see. I'm anxious to see what this guy's all about. I want to see if he's really the heir apparent, if he's going to be the number 1 overall draft pick, because Texas A&M, while they might be a little inexperienced on defense, you know they have athletes. So I'm very interested to see how this game shakes out tonight.
So you don't trust Jim Moore, and you say that because you were here in Atlanta when he was here, and you didn't trust him.
Everybody knows that.
You didn't like him. You didn't like him. You didn't trust him.
I don't trust him. No. In all seriousness, I really like Texas A&M in this football game. I think they're going to be able to run the ball effectively. I think they're going to be able to, control the clock and keep the ball away from Rosen. And this is a big game. I like Kevin Sumlin. I want to see him do well.
Kevin Sumlin is a likable guy, and it would be nice if he can get A&M to compete for an SEC West crown again. But I think he's on the hot seat. Anything less than 9 wins, and we might see the end of the Kevin Sumlin
And there'll be
regime.
a line of people wanting to pick him up. Remember a couple years ago, there was talk about when they were going to fire Jason Garrett that he was going to be the next head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So here we are 2 years ago, same guy. Now all of a sudden he's on the hot seat at A&M. If I'm him, I'm like, hey, whatever. You don't want me, I'll go somewhere else and I'll be successful.
All right, speaking of the hot seat, they got the Monday night game right here in town at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Chick-fil-A kickoff classic. Tennessee, ranked 25, takes on Georgia Tech. Butch Jones, clearly smack dab on the hot seat, always gets his Vols off to a great start, and somehow they just kind of slide at the end of the season. They're coming off a 9-win season, but 3 losses down the stretch. I'm not really sure what to expect out of this Tennessee team, especially when you have a new quarterback.
Yeah, new quarterback tonight, and of course, all the lights are going to be on them. Sellout crowd at Mercedes-Benz. You're going up against an unorthodox offense, Georgia Tech, but they have had time to prepare for it, so I'll give them a little bit there. But, you know, Tennessee year after year, yeah, Butch Jones comes up a little bit short of where they're supposed to be, but let's not forget about all the injuries at this team. I'm not here to make excuses for the man, but they're going to be without 2 offensive linemen tonight, their number 1 returning wide receiver, their starting middle linebacker, and they're still 3-point favorites. And Butch Jones is on the hot seat. So there's a lot going into this football game coming up tomorrow night.
Got someone typing in saying this is a must-win for Butch Jones. Can't afford to lose this game on Monday night.
I think so.
Yeah, it kind of sets the tone for the season. But stranger things have happened. When you look at the SEC East, as wide open as it is, and Tennessee having to break in a new quarterback, etc., can the Vols, a few breaks this way, that way, can they compete in the division?
I haven't seen them play yet, but quite possibly they could. I mean, the SEC East is that open. I think, you know, Georgia, depending on what happens at quarterback, has got to be the leader in the clubhouse right now, especially after what you saw with Florida last night and their issues at quarterback. But really, what's that with all the suspensions they were dealing with? So it's really hard to get a fair assessment on the SEC East right now. And now you throw South Carolina in the mix with the impressive win against NC State. So
I'm not sure there's really a leader in the division. Georgia's, who knows what their quarterback situation is.
Right.
Florida, can they somehow find offense between now and the start of the conference schedule? I look at this East, and this is really intriguing. Is South Carolina the X factor? Like you said, does Will Muschamp get this team over the top?
And if Missouri finds a way to beat South Carolina next, I'm just saying. Then all of a sudden they're in the conversation. It's wide open. But Tennessee, I will know this. Paul Johnson, and you know Paul Johnson from being here in Atlanta. If they win this game, you're talking about 3 wins last year against the SEC East. They beat Vanderbilt, Georgia, and Kentucky. If he beats Tennessee to start the season in 2017, we're never going to hear the end of it, Bob. We're never going to hear the end of it. And it's a complete indictment of the SEC East at that point.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's funny. College football season just kicks off yesterday, and already folks want to talk about the Alabama-LSU matchup, the Iron Bowl.
Can we just enjoy the moment? Can we?
All right, let's enjoy next week. There's 4 big games coming up on the schedule next week involving SEC teams. Yeah, you got TCU, Arkansas. I think we're going to find out a lot about Arkansas in this game. We're going to find out a lot about Auburn taking on Clemson. South Carolina goes on the road. Georgia, Notre Dame. As you look at that schedule, anything you want to yap about? I mean, this is some great matchups for the second week of the season.
Well, we talked about Arkansas a moment ago going 9-3. I think a win over TCU would be very much needed in that case. But no, obviously the one that jumps out to you is Clemson Auburn. What do they have at quarterback? This is going to be a very tough game for them to go on the road and win in Death Valley. And then Georgia, you know, going on the road to Notre Dame. I know a lot of people are making that trip. The Falcons play the Bears that week, so there's some people doing both games.
Absolutely.
So a lot of Dogs fans will be up there in South Bend, but who's going to be under center? That's the question. So, you know, Eason's health's a big question, and if he's not able to play, you touched on it earlier. I mean, how do you change the playbook? What's their game plan going to be? And Notre Dame looked pretty good.
Well, Kirby Smart, it wasn't the perfect start to his season in year 2. Goes 8-5 last year in his first season after coming back to Athens. Your thoughts on Kirby Smart? We're only 14 games into the Kirby Smart regime. Do you feel comfortable if you're a Georgia fan?
They don't know. You know, Georgia fans, they're just waiting for anything to go wrong so they can complain about it. You know what I mean?
Like every other fan.
Like every other SEC. You know, I don't know yet. I really just don't know yet, especially now with the quarterback situation. But if that doesn't work out, you got 2 of the best running backs in the nation to lean back on. Defensively, I think they're going to get there. They're very young. Don't forget Malcolm Parrish did not play. I don't think he'll be back for the Notre Dame game. So I think Kirby, I'm waiting to see. I'm waiting to see because they have so much talent. Year after year after year, they're top 5 in recruiting. Where are these people going? Are they not playing?
I hear you. Well, a lot of people are already Georgia fans chiming in, feel good about the game going up to South Bend. I'm not sure if this is even a measuring stick game for this team because we don't know how good Notre Dame is coming off a 4-8 season last year. Is a win over Notre Dame, is that, I don't know how good a win over Notre Dame is, quite frankly.
I think it is because you're talking about whether it's Fromm or Eason at quarterback. It's going to be a huge confidence boost for this team in the coaching staff. I think there's possibly some doubters after the way things ended last year. I mean, you lost a lot of close football games. You got to find a way to win those. A win is a win, and you throw on the legend, the luster, if you will. I'm sorry, of going up to South Bend. That's a special place to play. And you walk out of there with the win. You're 2-0, and all of a sudden the schedule gets a little bit easier for you. And next thing you know, it's the cocktail party. You're in it. You're in the conversation. So it's absolutely a big game for them.
Auburn, Clemson. If you're an Auburn fan, obviously you want to win this football game, but what are you hoping you get out of this game at the end of the day? What are you hoping to see from your Tigers football team?
Well, I think defensively you want to see more of the same, what you saw yesterday. I think you want to see some growth at quarterback. They kind of kept the reins on him a little bit yesterday, see what he can do against a legitimate SEC West type defense. And that's what Clemson is. This is going to be a very tough challenge for them. And I wish these two teams would play every year. These matchups are great. I think Auburn, maybe Georgia Tech, Tennessee, ironically, are
first
playing
time since
Clemson.
19 whatever. It's great to see Georgia Tech and Tennessee back together. Yeah, but Auburn and Clemson, same thing. These schools are separated by 200, 250 miles. Why are you not playing these games? And as Nick Saban proved, you can play a top-tier team in week one, even lose that game and still get to where you need to be.
And it really has been. I think it's very interesting of where we've, kind of progressed to what, athletic departments' mindsets were years ago, where they didn't want any part of these games. They were scheduling the home and homes and stuff like that. And now all of a sudden you have schools fighting to get in these games. I mean, think about the exposure that Florida State and Alabama got last night. What kid wouldn't want to be a part of that? Even to a lesser extent, Monday night, Georgia Tech, Miami, or Georgia Tech, Tennessee, they're going to be the only game on. That's a great chance to, show kids what your program's all about. And I think you're going to see more and more of these matchups, the North Carolina State, the South Carolina type games where BYU, LSU even, to an extent, these major conferences getting together early on in the season.
Well, I think it's great to see Texas A&M opening the season against UCLA, marquee matchup. But at the end of the day, I would love to see Texas A&M and Texas get that rivalry rekindled.
Do you think that'll ever happen?
I don't see why you wouldn't do this as a season opening game, because all the attention in the state would be on the game. National TV would likely be on the game. This is just a win-win for both teams. It seems like just like the case with the Iron Bowl years ago when they didn't play. It's just a case of two schools with egos, and we're not going to give in. But why would you not play the game?
No, I like to see, you'd like to see. Now, I can't, was that a home and home, or did they play that neutral?
They always played that home and home.
It was a home.
It was always a home and home game.
That's where the UCLA Texas A&M game, I think out of all the ones we've mentioned, is a little bit different from them, where it's a home and home. They played last year at College Station. This year they're out at the Rose Bowl. You don't see many of those anymore.
Well, at the end of the day, we wrap up week one. You're Nick Saban.
Oh,
you're Nick Saban. Well, you're a little taller than Nick. Where do you feel about your team? A+, satisfied? It was kind of an A-, B+ sort of situation.
He's going to break it down into every single possible category possible. Defense, special teams, linebacker, secondary, the whole thing. I think defense and special teams are outstanding. They're exactly what you expect out of an Alabama football team, and ultimately were the difference in the game. I think Jalen Hurts played well. I think he made plays with his feet when he had to. I didn't turn the ball over. His decision-making was there, took advantage of the big play downfield to Ridley. But I think offensively overall as a whole, I don't know if it was play calling. I don't know if they felt like they just were going to dominate the game in the other two components and didn't feel the need to show them more. But offensively, they didn't show me a lot. And when you play against like an LSU and maybe even Auburn, the way their defense looked, we'll find out a little bit more about them next week. I don't think he's where he wants to be. now.
All right, let me ask you this question. I'll answer it first. What coach in the conference feels better about his team this morning than he did yesterday going into week one? And I look at Will Muschamp.
Sure.
When you've got a very good North Carolina State team that some people think can compete, I don't know if they can get there with Florida State and Clemson, but can compete in the ACC, and you knock them off, I think Will Muschamp has to feel really good about his team heading into Missouri next week. I think he's smiling about this, and I think, all of a sudden he's thinking, I think I've got what we need to compete in the SEC East.
It was a huge win for him. And you got to think where he's at mentally, because he's had a lot of shortcomings as a head coach. A lot of people, everybody's basically telling him, you're a coordinator, you're not a head coach. And South Carolina believed in him. They believed in him. They had a completely barren roster. They bring him in. They were limited offensively last year, and this year, hey, they put up a lot of points yesterday. And I don't want to say sky's the limit, but they're definitely pointing in the right direction. I think maybe even surprised himself a little bit yesterday.
Eric is writing in and said, what's the update on Florida State's quarterback? And we don't have an update yet. It did not look good. Francois needed to be helped off the field. You saw him get on the cart yesterday. It quite frankly doesn't look good, and I don't know that Florida State is expecting him back anytime soon. I assume we'll get something from Jimbo Fisher later today or on Monday.
Man, that's tough for them. They leaned on that defense a lot last night. Think about how they're going to have to lean on him moving forward if he's not the guy, and also the running game. They brought it. I thought it was interesting last night in that game that they made the change to the freshman at halftime. Yeah. If you're a true freshman getting the ball from Florida State, you're big time. You're big. That's about as big as it gets, man.
Well, we've stoked the flames on the SEC East. South Carolina, Georgia fans going at it. Doesn't matter who we're up against. I'm betting on the Dogs. After week one, it's strange to say, even with the quarterback injury, it's hard not to like Georgia in the SEC East, although it is completely wide open. I don't even know what to make of the SEC East right now, especially with Georgia's quarterback going down and Florida's offense looking so pathetic.
Yeah, we'll find out a little bit more. I think 2 weeks from now, once the injury dust is settled, once Tennessee's played Florida, once we find out where Georgia's quarterback's going to be, if South Carolina can take care of Missouri, we'll start to get some answers right now. At this point, it's complete speculation on our parts. But Fromm looked good yesterday. If you're a Georgia fan, you got to like the way that the backup played. And that's always dangerous when the backup plays well for the starter.
Well, Natalie has given us the update on Florida State's quarterback. Seminoles QB got rolled over by the Tide. That is his status. All right, Natalie, really...
Can't argue that.
No, you can't argue. He got beat up. I'm not going to say Jalen Hurts didn't get beat up, too, because Florida State put some pretty good hits on him as well.
Yeah.
But, Jalen Hurts will live to fight another day. Coach in the conference that is saying to himself this morning, we got a little bit more work. Who is that guy? Any thoughts on that?
I think it's probably Nick Saban. I know that's scary, but you know how he beats himself up. He can't be happy with the way the offense played last night. I understand who he's going up against, but look at his offensive coordinators that have been run out of town. Not run out of town, but he ran one of them off. The other guy went to the National Football League, so clearly this guy wasn't his first choice.
Well, I think it's got to be Jim McElwain right now. Their offense showed nothing. The 2 pick sixes in the first half, and you're thinking, all right, that's going to get these guys going. But Felipe Franks, in an odd way, looked good, but they weren't able to finish off drives. He has that crushing fumble when it looked like he had picked up a key first down. I think Jim McElwain is shaking his head and going back to the drawing board and says, fellas, we might need to do some reevaluation here.
Man, they were so undermanned.
This is a Michigan team that had lost 18 starters.
Let me tell you something. My biggest surprise in all of college football yesterday was Michigan's defense. Those guys, and here's the other thing about when you look at Michigan's defense. Every time a guy makes a tackle, he's from Los Angeles, he's from Florida, he's from Mississippi, he's from Detroit. So these camps that he's got going on all over the place, they're working out. Think about how he's turned Michigan around in like 2 years. I hate Michigan, but But it's remarkable what he's done. I mean, they were impressive yesterday.
I don't know if I hate Michigan, but I'm certainly not a big Jim Harbaugh fan. All right, we got to go. This is the Texas Pete Scoreboard Show. We will be here every Sunday, hopefully at 10 o'clock sharp, starting next Sunday. He's Hans Heiser. I'm Bob Fiscella. Hope you join us right here on SEC Country. Take care.